Okay. All right. Well, this is the latest episode of Own Life Vapor podcast, episode, I guess, 008. I'm your host, your hostess with the mostest, Jones Randall, Mount Baker Vapor, the director of sales here, personally vaping for over 7 years. And I also used vaping to stop smoking, so I'm living proof that vape saves lives. We'll be covering some really exciting topics today, starting with, is vape a fad? Then we're going to be looking at organizing your store to maximize your profit. After that, we'll be looking at advertising your shop, what works, what doesn't, and what may be illegal. And then last but definitely not least, house juices, to do or not to do. That is the question. We're going to be spending some time talking to our guest here. We have Jonathan Wade of Chewy's Juice. You want to introduce yourself, John?
Yeah, guys, I'm Jonathan Wade from Chewy's Juice.
I stole his thunder, guys. You can't blame him for that. That was my fault.
I have been a vapor since 2010, so I'm at about the 8-year mark.
Awesome.
Vaping since before ego batteries even existed, so I remember the massive hype of egos. I started my juice company about 4 years ago now, and going strong and loving it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, what we'll do is we'll break into this first topic, which is vaping a fad? You know, since vaping has evolved to such an extent, many people are beginning to wonder if vaping as a concept is merely a fad, but I certainly don't think so, especially when looking at the evidence of smoking populations dying down across the nation. In 2014, 16.8% of Americans smoked, but now in 2018, that number is down to 15%. And I know that doesn't even really sound like that much. It doesn't sound like a huge drop, but that equates to over 300,000 less smokers in America across the past 4 years. So it's really no surprise that big tobacco was the first to jump on the, vaping is a fad train.
Of course.
And then, of course, something crazy happened. They started to come out with their own versions of vape products, and suddenly it was no longer a fad.
Who would have guessed?
Exactly. John, do you think that the reduction in the smoking rates is what moved big tobacco to just move into our space?
I absolutely do. When I first started vaping, my first device was a little cig-alike device, a cheap knockoff of the blue cigs, and they worked terribly. They would work for 5 minutes and then stop, so I had to have like 8 of them, right?
Exactly.
But even then I knew, like, just using it, because up until then there was no alternative to smoking. Like, vaping didn't exist. So when I tried that for the first time, having never encountered it before, I was blown away, and I was like, this is the future.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing the future. Maybe a decade before the technology's good enough to be worth it, or 5 years. But I knew back then that it was going to change everything. And I could also tell that big tobacco wasn't taking it seriously, and they were leaving an area open for new players to come into the market. And, thankfully for that. But it definitely is not a fad to me. It is, for me personally, the only thing under the sun that got me to quit smoking entirely. And I've been smoke-free for quite a while now. I say that it's definitely changed my life, and something that's changed my life that much, in my mind, can't possibly be a fad.
Yeah, and I totally agree. For me, when I saw big tobacco, it excites me that not only is vaping not a fad, but the technology surrounding vape continues to evolve. Yeah. New mods, new pods, new accessories. Yeah. None of us know what a device is going to look like in 2025, but the only thing we know is it's going to look cool as hell. That's all we know.
Absolutely.
And more proof that vaping isn't a fad is the fact that Public Health England, or the FDA UK, publicly announced that vaping is 95% healthier than smoking. Yeah. And then the American Cancer Society acknowledged that vaping reduces harm because, as you mentioned, it is one of the only ways you can successfully quit smoking. John, have you seen this info impact the perception of vaping itself?
I have. I think that there was initially a lot of misinformation thrown around from other parties, but I have noticed an evening out of that information being balanced out by the good information, the reliable studies that have been done, and I've definitely noticed an impact in public perception as a result of that.
Yeah, and me too. And for me, it validated every sneaking insecurity that
Yeah.
I ever had about
Right.
the industry, just fading away. It made me believe again because for a moment there, I was like Debbie Downer with a rain cloud over my head, limping in crutches, depressed
Right.
over the possibility that vaping could just disappear.
Yeah.
But the evidence is showing that it's definitely not a fad.
Absolutely.
With this in mind, we know that countless medical journals, research studies, and harm reduction reports show that it's here to stay. And so I hope you agree with me when you say we should be excited and hopeful because we picked a winning industry.
Absolutely, I do agree.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's jump into our second topic, organizing your store to maximize profit. A big area of contention and confusion that we see in vape and smoke shops is in-store organization, specifically how to set up a store to maximize profit. And the first big question that one should ask is the vibe that you want your store to create. We all have limited real estate, so make sure that the physical arrangement of the store matches the psychology of the customer.
Of course.
And of course, one thing we know is that it's been scientifically proven that consumers have a natural inclination to shop counterclockwise. So any display that's just to the right of the door is prime real estate space. Did you know that?
I did not know that, and that is
Isn't it cool?
fascinating. Yeah.
It is cool. I did a lot of research when I took this role. I did a lot of research into what is the most impactful place to put merchandise, especially because when you have tiny real estate, you've got to maximize every single square inch.
Absolutely.
And so I started doing a bit of research. So any shopper that's entering your in your shop was going to be drawn immediately there. It's psychological.
Yeah.
So anything, it's almost like they're drawn there as if by magic. And so we want to make sure that the display to the right of our main entrance is full of high profit items.
Absolutely.
With eye-popping graphics. With John, Chewy's Juice is an eclectic brand, and it has a unique theme, you. Please tell us how you encourage your partner shops to organize their in-store shopping experience around your brand.
Well, sure. First and foremost, my brand does have my beaming face on it. So if they could just put that front and center, maybe on a massive pedestal, that would really be perfect for me. No, I would say that when you're organizing your shop, each shop has its own unique vibe and feel. Every shop has their different target customer bases. So you might have a shop that's near a college campus that's young and hip, and you're going to want to have like cool posters on the wall, things that really grab the interest of like the college kids that are going in there. Whereas you might have a shop that's in a more a part of town that's more geared towards middle-aged people, and they're not going to want to see all these eye-popping graphics and colors in their face and posters for cloud competitions and all this stuff. That's not where their head's at. So
Exactly.
I think the best way to organize your shop is to know your customer base and to gear it towards their comfort level and what their interests are.
Awesome. With experience being the key to customer retention, owners always have to worry about the environment that they're setting up. Some want to create a lounging environment so that vaping becomes a social activity. And speaking of vape shops, they said that it reinforces the mental image of the normal lonely activity of smoking a cigarette. Yeah. So it reminds you of experiencing vape via social interaction is pretty essential if you are vaping to quit smoking. Wouldn't you agree?
I would absolutely agree.
And another thing that vape shop owners are looking at in terms of organization is they wanted to feel like a home away from home, or remind you of your favorite drinking bar. Yeah. But regardless of the theme you choose, there are a few critical rules and really old school retail philosophy that will drive more profit into your store. So with vaping essentials like juices and coils, you'll want to keep them as far from the entrance as possible.
Absolutely.
Just like with any other staples. That's the reason why when you walk into a grocery store, the drinks and milk and eggs are all as far back as possible. So the same principles apply here, because you want to increase the time that your customers spend in the store, and to push them to cover as much ground as they can. The more ground they cover, the more time they spend, meaning the more money they spend.
Absolutely.
And so in terms of shelving, that's another area. John, do you have a recommendation as to where a shop would place your product? Would it be eye level? Would it be on a shelf? Where would you recommend them to place a premium juice like Chewy's?
I would recommend to place it at eye level. I know that for me personally, I walk into vape shops many times all day, every day. So, probably about 20 shop visits a week is what I do. And I've got a lot of experience with seeing how they do things. And the people who tend to put their juice in like the cases that are where you have to look downward to be able to see the juice, it just somehow reduces the efficacy of that visual.
Yeah.
There's just something about that downward point of view that psychologically affects how you're perceiving the products that you're viewing.
That is so true, and that's one thing that I noticed as well, is that customers are going to bend or reach if it's cheap. They don't mind if it's something that's cheap. They'll bend and reach as much as possible. But you want to make it easier for them to purchase the products that are going to boost your profitability, your premium juices, and if you carry a house juice. So we want to keep our eye on the prize, which would be profit.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, next we're going to step into advertising your shop. What works, what doesn't, and what may be illegal. And this is an interesting topic, because there's so many different opinions that people have on how we're going to advertise. But we do know that gone are the heydays of vape advertising, where we're able to pretty much make any claims we want, a longer life. There was one that was like everlasting satisfaction. I was like, what?
How can we even measure that? What are the metrics? What are the metrics for this? I would love
to see a big cloud.
I'm very interested to know how we pin this down.
Exactly. I was like, everlasting satisfaction? Like, that is, I can see why, the FDA is like, seriously, come on, people.
Right.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But, we still have to advertise our shops and our brand. And to say that advertising for vape shops is a challenge is really a huge understatement.
Oh, it's a massive understatement.
Massive. And many of our partners feel the pain, especially smaller vape shops that may be in saturated areas. Yeah. John, what advertising challenges have you faced in promoting Chewy's?
Well, my first advertising challenge that I ever faced was that, hey, this product got me to quit smoking, and that's pretty cool, and I would love to promote that, but unfortunately, we are not allowed to promote our devices and our products as smoking cessation devices. Exactly. And that's 100% the largest hurdle that we have. We can't necessarily promote it the way that we view it ourselves.
Exactly.
So I would say that that's my number one challenge. and then the number two challenge is with the compliance of the regulations that have been coming through. For example, I would love to be posting on Instagram and Facebook all day, every day. I'll snap a cool little pic and upload it, but we are to the point now where we need to make sure that we're including warnings and deeming regulation compliant warnings on all the images that we put out there. And it just adds extra steps to me reaching my audience.
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. And, advertising mediums, for example, are probably where a lot of merchants and a lot of shops run into difficulty. Like, for example, paid search. It appears to be the most effective means to be ranked from first glance. But once you dig a little deeper, you'll start to notice that with so many companies that are competing for the same search terms, rankings are never guaranteed. Right. And even if you do get noticed, it's like flying a plane in a hurricane to kind of wrangle that budget into a realistic monthly spend. You're like, it was $200 here, $977 here. You're like, oh my God, what do I spend? And so, in short, Google and Bing ads, whenever you're lucky enough to find a network that might actually allow you to buy media, they drain your budgets.
Yeah.
Another popular medium is affiliate sites. And they're great for capturing traffic in our ad space, but most affiliates, and tell me if you agree, that they have no interest in your actual product unless you're willing to pay more than the next shop.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, for me, if you have a budget for that, it's extremely effective. But if you're a small shop with very limited marketing budget, you might find that affiliates just leave you wanting more.
Absolutely.
You know, John, do you have any like advertising tips that you could give our shop owners that may be listening?
Well, sure. Advertising tips for the shop owners. I would say that, first of all, and as we said before, know your audience, know the demographic of the people in your area and of the vapors in your area. Yep. For example, I know one local shop that I really, really appreciate focuses on like older people in the working field who are, you know, vaping while they're out on a site working in the hot sun. Yeah. And, you know, reaching out to those people is different than reaching out to the 21-year-old college kid.
Exactly.
I would say that... Remind me of the question again.
Any tips for our shop owners? Your juice is so good you can't even remember questions. That already promotes Chewy.
That's
it's so
right.
Good. Like you'll forget a question that was just asked.
I'm going to use that from now on.
Exactly. See, that's advertising.
Yeah.
That's your tagline.
Yeah.
So good you'll forget the question you were just asked.
For sure. I would say the number one thing in my mind that a shop owner can do is get involved with their community and customer base. Get onto social media. Have some events where they can just come and meet you and interact with you as the normal, real person that you
Exactly.
are. Be yourself and be yourself around your customers and make sure that they know that they are welcome in your shop and that you're throwing events that will bring them into the door and get to experience that firsthand.
Awesome. You know, and one creative way that I've seen to advertise a shop is by calling a local talk radio show. And if you make sure to mention the name and your location of your store, anyone listening to that show has just been exposed to your brand. Yeah. It's one of those ways that you don't have to have a budget for that if you're just wily enough to call, like I've done. Hey, I'm just going to call and talk about something. It actually works. Yeah. And another one that there's no rules against is contacting your local newspaper and requesting to speak with an op-ed columnist. You know, these are the guys that are looking to make waves and challenge social norms and are the most likely to support industries like ours that are perceived as alternative.
And, you know, that's a great point. Because so many people outside of our industry don't understand our industry, if you just approach them and say, hey, I'm from the vape industry and I'd like to tell you something about it. Exactly. More often than not, you're going to get a response. You're going to get someone who wants to hear what you have to say because by default, there is lots of misinformation. And aside from that, we have a history of lack of information reaching the public.
That's exactly true. And, you know, reaching out to a journalist, that is exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for information. They want to be the person known as delivering this information to the public. Absolutely. And, you know, they won't be able to get you a full page ad in their online newspaper edition, but they will shine a light on your shop and on our industry. And I really think that helps us as an entire industry.
Absolutely.
You know, and you were just mentioning social media, and that is very true. It's still the most effective way to advertise your shop. Post engaging content, speak to the problems you help your customers solve, encourage vaping advocacy, and really appeal to the mentality of the desired customer, and then hit Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat with the goal of social saturation. Yep. Would you agree?
Absolutely, I would agree.
Awesome. Okay. And now, our last topic.
Ooh. Dun, da, da, da.
Dun, da, da, da. House juices, to do or not to do? That is the question.
Sure is.
House juices actually hold the most profit for vape shops, which is why we mention them, and anyone who manufactures their own juice. And sometimes they carry over 600% profit. But the question I have is it really the best position to put oneself in? How do you feel about house juices, John?
I don't think it's, well, you know, of course, I run a premium juice line. So if I thought that house juice was the best way to go, it would have been the direction that I took. So that right there is an example of part of my opinion on that. But First thing you need to consider with a house juice is the sanitary nature of the environment that it's being produced. That's not to say that because it's a house juice, it's unsanitary. That's not the case at all. But if you're doing a house juice in shop, like, shake and vape, then you're by default not doing the whole controlled laboratory environment that, like, for example, my juice is made in.
And Mount Baker Vapor's juice
exactly.
is made in.
So first of all, you have to consider the sanitary nature of the environment. Are the people mixing it wearing gloves? Where are they storing their materials? Or is it sitting on the floor in the back, which is something that I have seen at certain places and things like that. Second of all, in shops like that, you frequently have different people mixing the juice at different times depending on who's on shift.
Right.
So, like, for example, the juices that we make are made in batches that are large enough that any minor variance, any single extra drop that might accidentally go in doesn't adjust the overall composure of the mix itself.
Right.
A lot of juice lines have flavors that take 19 flavor concentrates going into it. And if you're making a tiny 30 ml bottle of that and you get one drop of something wrong, it throws off the entire mixture and it can taste differently. I've heard people coming to me saying they went to a certain shop and it's amazing when Michelle makes it, but it's really not so great whenever Steve makes it. And so you've got that variance among
Steve needs to leave it alone.
Steve's a great guy, but maybe he should sell the mods, So you've got consistency issues as well. And then the most important issue to me with it is that you also might not be compliant with the law the way you're mixing it in-house. Only, not in every way, but insofar as our products are registered with the FDA with exact specific percentages of the ingredients that are going into them. And if you're mixing in shop and you accidentally put, half a milliliter extra of this or, maybe a tenth of a milliliter extra of that, all of a sudden the product you're selling to that customer is technically illegal and not the product that you have registered with the FDA.
Exactly.
So there are a multitude of concerns, and if there's a place with house juice that's great, but just be aware of all the different pitfalls that can happen if that's how you choose to operate.
Exactly. And personally, I feel similarly that house juices aren't the way to go, and mainly just because the FDA classifies any company or shop that's bottling e-juice and labeling it as a manufacturer, not a retailer. Yeah. A lot of shops don't realize that. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm just a retailer." Right. Not if you're bottling and labeling, you're not. And the kicker here is just regardless of the size of the business, they don't care if you're a tiny manufacturer or if you're a Mount Baker Vapor. They could care less. And that's really the point that a large majority of the vape shop owners fail to acknowledge. Right. Whether they produce 10 bottles or 1,000, you're considered a manufacturer.
Exactly.
And the reason that this distinction is so important is because when vape shop owners reach out to the FDA for clarification on major issues, the advice that they're receiving is nearly almost always about a shop that's simply a reseller of a product that's manufactured by someone else. Mm-hmm. But unless they've actually registered as an e-juice manufacturer with the FDA, they have to realize that all the advice from the FDA that they're receiving as a store owner / retailer won't protect them in an enforcement event. And that's the scary part is they're like, "Oh yeah, the FDA told me I'm going to be fine." Let me make sure.
Right.
I know there's a lot of misinformation that's out there.
Absolutely.
And so I was just like, "What? They told you you're going to be okay? Oh yeah, I can just I can keep producing this. There's no problem. All I got to do is throw my label on there, and I'll be fine. There's no need."
Right. And another thing about doing the shake and vape methodology of delivering juice to the customers is that you have to also be forward thinking in this industry because this industry is so new and is so young. And of course, as we all know, we're under heavy scrutiny from the FDA. Yeah. So if you're operating that way, shake and vape in shop, one bottle at a time, that's not a sustainable model for what's going to be coming down the pipe in the future. And at best, you might at best you're okay right now, and at worst, who knows, 1 month, 2 months, 6 months from now, something might happen that just totally kills how you're operating, and you won't be able to do that anymore. So your best bet is to keep up with everything that's coming down the pipe from the FDA, keep up with regulations, and do your best to make your product as be compliant before the compliance is even in place.
Exactly. And that's one thing is like, they're like, oh, well, the FDA left this open to interpretation because they want us to look at the deeming regs a certain way. Yeah. Well, conversely, it also allows for states to come in and enforce regulations from the FDA in pretty much any way they see fit, which is why we're seeing bills in nearly every state house that's aiming to bleed the industry dry. Right. And I did want to ask, John, are you about that life? Are you pro shop?
I'd say I'm pro shop.
You would? Okay. Yeah. Good. Because, not golf pro shop. Just in support of the vape shop life.
Well, golf pro shops are cool.
Yeah, they are. But are you about that life, John? I got to ask you.
I'm about that life.
You're about that life.
That's right.
And as premium juice manufacturers, you agree it's our responsibility to kind of look out for the shops that keep us all afloat.
Absolutely it is. And, the thing is, there are many, many good players among us, tons of people like ourselves who want to be at the forefront of the industry and want to do things properly in a way that's safe for the consumer and compliant with the FDA regulations. There are a few bad players out there that unfortunately cast a pall over the whole industry and all of us. But there's so many great shop owners, and it's rare that I meet one that isn't genuine and a kind person who's genuinely doing what they do because they want to help people. And exactly. That's something that I really value.
I value that too. And because some of these shops are out there fighting for their piece of the pie, they're feeling like they're being cheated because they've been put in a tough spot by these players who just really have no respect for any of the FDA regulations. And so they're like, do I continue to drop my price to compete with Hack Shack down the street, who's pumping out crappy juice with chunks of contaminants in it, but he serves 500 customers a day? Is it that guy that didn't register with the FDA, that shop that smells questionable when you walk in the door? All of those things are considered. But if you're having trouble nailing down this this issue, let us help you. Don't devalue your company's image just to compete with these cash grab shops who are in it just long enough to cash out. Buy an affordable FDA registered and FDA compliant juice for any of your budget conscious customers, and then push the burden of responsibility on companies like Mount Baker Vapor, Chewy's Juice, and things of that nature. But please don't try to be a one or two shop manufacturer, as that makes you a prime target for the FDA.
Yes, it does.
And they're looking for low hanging fruit to just pluck. Just don't get plucked.
Don't get plucked.
Don't get plucked.
I'm gonna make
That's
those
the moral
shirts.
Of the story. Don't get plucked.
Chewy's Juice, don't get plucked shirts available next week.
That is awesome. Well, like we just said, don't get plucked out here, everybody. And I wanted to wrap it up with everyone and just say that this information is really just to help support any vape shop owner who feels like they're out there by themselves.
Yeah.
And so, did you have anything important coming up, John, going on with Chewy's that you wanted to share with our audience?
Well, I've been traveling all across Arizona lately. So if you're in the Arizona area, then absolutely there's plenty to look forward to. I've been working on a lot of things. One of the things that I'm really excited about is thus far my juice has been in glass bottles, and I'm in the next couple weeks I'm updating all of my labels to be FDA compliant.
Yep.
Unfortunately, my labels had a very unique shape to them, which I am having to abandon to make room for multiple warning labels and such.
Exactly.
But I still kept the heart of the business, the heart of the presentation of the product the same, and I'm going to be releasing them in new chubby Gorilla bottles. Much easier to use, beautiful, and you should be looking forward to seeing it on many, many more shelves very soon.
Awesome. Well, this will draw to close the latest episode of Own Life Vapor Podcast. And if you need anything from us, reach out to wholesale@mountbakervapor.com. If you have any ideas, thoughts, suggestions, feel free. And make sure to check us out on Facebook. And don't forget to follow Chewy's Juice and Mount Baker Vapor on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, and I hope you have a great life and keep calm and vape on.
That's right.